Oh, hello, everybody. It is already March. Can you believe it? All right. Well, today we are going to work on how to ask for a raise. All right. So that's what we're doing today. So let's just go ahead and get into it. The first thing I want to say about what I'm going to go over with you is that sometimes part of being able to get more money in your profession is being able and willing to leave. All right. Not every negotiation is going to go well. Not every employer has the ability to pay you more or the willingness. So, part of the power of this situation is for you to realize that you bring a lot to the table and that if this isn't a fit, you'd be okay to leave. One additional note on this, a lot of times when I've been working with women over the years, one of the things that trips ladies up from both asking for a raise and both being willing to leave is they say, my boss gives me such flexibility. I have so much flexibility in this. And women value that flexibility to be able to pick her kids up or leave early for a soccer game or whatever, that a lot of times it will cost her quite a bit of money. And where I want to say about this is you can negotiate that into other positions. So not that you would necessarily just quit your job and go looking for something else, but flexibility is often able to be negotiated in, right? So asking for flex hours or asking a couple of days work from home or whatever is fits your life is most important to you. Those are things that you can actually ask for. And I'm mentioning this because that's one of the biggest sticking points why women a lot of times don't even ask for a raise or feel like, oh, I get all this flexibility, I shouldn't be fairly compensated, or afraid to look for a new job. So I just want to mention that a lot of places will offer flexibility. All right. Okay, so let's think about how we're going to talk about the value that you bring to the table. So when you're going to ask for a raise, the things that we need to be able to like document and communicate about this for you is what you are doing and why the work that you're doing is worth so much more than you're being paid that you actually deserve to be paid more. All right, that's really what's going on. So a couple things to be thinking about as you're getting ready to ask for a raise. I want you to start pondering this, and I'm going to teach you some of these things, and I want you to write them down when you're at your desk, or doing your work. I want you to be thinking about this. One of the main components of being able to make more money is being able to see value. It's being able to understand the exchange, and it's really seeing the full value of what you're bringing to the table and making sure that you're fairly compensated for that. A note, on a little side note here, the value for the work that you do in your whatever the market that you work in is. I want to be very clear here that this is not charging your worth. I actually really kind of hate that expression, and here's why. One, every single person I've ever worked with has had some flavor of worthiness issue, right? And I've been in masterminds with Olympians and multiple 10-figure business owners, and everybody's got a little bag of shit when it comes to their own worthiness, men and women, right? And so you're not charging for your worth. Your worth is not on the table. Like, really, the price of your employment is for what you bring to the table for this organization. And I don't want you to get mixed up with these things because a lot of times people's sense of worthiness changes, right? And a lot of times we have a lot of conditions on our sense of worthiness. And there's many of us that actually sometimes very rarely actually feel our own sense of worthiness. Okay. So you can have your worthiness. You don't need to solve your worthiness problems to get paid properly, is kind of where I'm going with this. So for the sake of this discussion, we want to separate out those two things. And actually, for the whole rest of your life, you could really separate them out. Your worthiness isn't tied to the market value of the work that you do. Okay. All right. So when you're negotiating, the things that we want to be thinking about are like, what is my employment bringing to the table? And you really want to be looking for the places where do I have capacity that's not being fully utilized? Like, where can I take on more? Or sometimes the other question is, what responsibilities are you taking that are like above and beyond, right? So if you're already going above and beyond, right? So let's say you're being paid for whatever position you're in, and you're actually doing some management or whatever the step above you is. So that's a good way to know that it's probably time to ask for a raise. So if they're being able to get a lot of value out of your time, energy, and attention, that's something to notice. So any responsibilities that you're taking that go above and beyond, I want you to write them down and start to notice, like, if I had to guess a monetary value on this, just make a best guess. This is really for you to build confidence on. right? Then the next question I think I just said is, where do you have capacity for more growth? Like, what could you be taking on, right? Because sometimes that's another place that you can either get started right away, so that way when you go into your negotiations, you're already doing the higher value work, and sometimes that can be the negotiation for a promotion. All right. Then I want you to think about the results that your employment has given them. Now, this could be resources like time, energy, money saved. This could be accolades, like your team finished their project, fastest or the best. I want you to think about the speed at which you do your work, and if there's really a benefit, to speed. I'm not saying you work fast, but I'm just saying that could be a place to look for value. I want you to think about, if you're on a team, how that team operates and what you're bringing to that, and start to notice these things. And if there's anything around culture, that's another place. All right. The last bit that I really want you to think about is, what's either your bosses or the business owner, whoever, what's their goals, right? Because when you negotiate, you want to put yourself kind of on the same team as them almost. Like, you don't want it to be adversarial, or like, here, you're working on this and here's how I can help and here's what I want. All right. So the next thing that we want to be thinking about is how much money you actually want. All right. So you want to be really clear about that before you go into any sort of negotiation. All right. So you want to be thinking about this, not just in terms of salary, but also like the full package. And I'm assuming that you're in corporate at this point, but a lot of times there's the salary, there's bonuses, there's paid time off, there's other benefits, tuition reimbursement, healthcare, things like that. So I want you to really fully see where the value of the package is. When you're thinking about, especially if you have to get a new job, or there's other room for negotiation, other ways that you want to work. Do you want to work from home? Do you want to work from home a couple days? Do you want an office to go to? What's this ideal situation? So that way, the more clear you are on it, the more that you can ask for exactly what it is you want. And I would know what it is you want, plan to ask for a little bit more, so that way you have a little bit of wiggle room to negotiate, and have the things that you want prioritized in terms of the order, right? So if like salary is super important to you, but benefits less so, well then all right. Or if working from home 5 days a week is so important for you that you'd actually be willing to trade in some other aspect to be able to get that, like, just get clear around exactly what you want. All right. So the next thing is getting your request like ready. And so what I would really suggest doing is thinking through how you're going to ask for this. You're going to need to know who you're going to ask for the raise. As some of these things, like, it's your boss, sometimes you have to talk to HR, you know what I mean? So you need to know who you're asking. And also for this negotiation, you need to know what's important to them. All right. So then what I always do for a negotiation is I like to write the things down. I like to get really, really clear. I like to know all my points. And for something like a negotiation, I would really suggest practicing asking for what you want with a couple of, your friends, your spouse, whoever. Now, if asking for a raise makes you viscerally uncomfortable, you are not alone. All right. The vast majority of women really don't like to directly ask for what they want. Oftentimes women will complain as like an indirect way to make a request. And that's part of just like a little patriarchal conditioning and whatever else. So asking really clearly and directly for what it is you want might be edgy for you. All right. So if that's the case, I want you to practice this. And also you might need to practice like with a fella, right? The reason is sometimes the way that women are conditioned makes us feel a certain kind of way when we're interacting with men. So especially if your boss or the HR director, whoever you're going to have to ask is a man, practice really communicating this with a man back and forth. And the reason is so that way your nervous system can understand that asking for what I want is safe, and I'm going to be okay here, right? And I want you to really do that, because if you tense up, if you're asking and your voice gets high and you don't believe you're actually worthy, and, you're not in a clear state of confidence, and you're wobbling, you're going to make it really easy to say no to your request. All right. And is that shitty? Yes. Yes, it is. But the world that we live in requires us to be a certain kind of way. And so we prevail. So these are some of the things that you can do to ask for a raise. All right. So we want to recap. So you have to figure out who you're talking to, what you want. You want to bring a really strong case for why the value of what you're bringing to the work is so much higher than what you're being compensated for, that you can make a case. Also, do a little homework in your industry. Like, there are certain professions also, like sometimes nurses are on steps or teachers are on step schedules where there's really not a ton of room for negotiation. And if that's the case for you, then that is the case. But I would also be looking for, if there's any other places to work around. And then sometimes if you can get a job offer and you like your job, you can also bring that job offer to your place of employment and ask them to match it, right? So if you're already happy where you are, sometimes you can use that leverage in negotiations. So I hope that you will take this and run with it. Like, I really, really want all the women to be properly paid. And I would put yourself on a schedule so that every year you're used to asking for a raise. Like, ask for a raise every year. That's a great financial habit. Or switching jobs every few years. People who switch jobs every 2 to 5 years tend to make much, much more money over their career. So being willing to shift, being willing to ask, and being willing to negotiate, these are really 3 traits that you need to have to be super well paid. All right. I love you so much, and I will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.